It beggars belief, Charlie. I mean, even when people are released, they're normally released on licence, so they can be monitored, so they are, you know, their behaviours can be curtailed in the free world. And yet even two of them aren't even on licence anymore.
That just won't happen for two of those members, key members of this gang. 8 men were sentenced in June of 2018, but this was organised on a massive scale. We know from the transcripts surrounding what happened in Oxford that there were many more perpetrators than the men who were jailed. And you read out there the years that this abuse was conducted according to the prosecution, which was from 1998 to 2005. Now, they are being released around 7 years after they were sentenced. They conducted this abuse for 7 years, 1 year in prison for every year that they kept children under this appalling and horrendous abuse. As you said, leaving those girls at their mercy. There are further details from the court transcripts that are still coming out now because many of the details haven't fully been released at the time. We also know that in the opening of this trial, the prosecutor said that the girls were told to describe some of the perpetrators as uncles, showing, I think, the family links behind these abuses. I've said this for a while now, that I don't think we've got to the bottom of this key part of Britain's grooming gang scandal, which is how many of the perpetrators are linked not just by criminality, but by blood, that they are family members.
We're surely not being asked to believe that these men are safe to be released, that they've changed the way they think and behave. 7 years isn't really long enough to have changed their behaviour anyway. But, I mean, what's going on? Surely we cannot trust them not to just perpetrate the same horrors again.
When they were sentenced in June 2018, in one of the biggest trials in the history of Oxford Crown Court, a Thames Valley police officer said that the men were unrepentant, as we've seen regularly in so many of these trials, that they did not take responsibility for their actions. Indeed, as we've seen on multiple occasions, family members support them. They don't think that what they've done is wrong. And I think many survivors and victims of this abuse will say, if you don't admit to the fault that you've carried out here, if you don't apologise as one step for this horrific abuse, how on earth can you be allowed to leave before your full sentence is served? These perpetrators being released, they served just 7 years behind bars. That's 1 year for every year of a horrifying abuse that they inflicted on those poor girls.
Yeah, good morning to you both. Absolutely disgusting. I think that, you know, when you're looking at they are predators, they were predators, and who's to say they're not still predators who are being released? And you mentioned 2 of them now, their conditions have all been removed, which means that they can go about their business as they want to. They could go back to the communities where these victims are living and trying to get on with their life, and have spent decades being absolutely traumatized. So yeah, it's terrible. What I also add is that when you're looking at those that have committed rape, sexual offences, violence against women and girls, I don't really understand why they should be serving half their sentence and then be released into communities to get on with their lives while their victims are actually the prisoners for probably most of their lives.
Now, there's been so much focus on this issue over the last few months, and the report from Dame Louise Casey, big news in the House of Commons as well. But do you think there are wider questions for the community to ask about these horrific crimes? Were they covered up? Were men excused by the community? Do you think there are questions to answer?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that this independent inquiry, hopefully that will also cover that, because there will be those that refuse to speak at those previous reviews who will now be compelled to speak. And I think the documentation that comes out that may link some of these perpetrators within those communities to people that might have been approached by police or social services, despite the fact that they did cover up. But there may be elements of that that will come out into this inquiry where they will now be compelled to speak. And of course, you've got to look at wider issues in any of these situations to see what people knew, how much they knew. Did they consider speaking out? Did they protect or try to protect those victims? Were they also, silenced themselves? So I think there are questions to be answered in all aspects of this, including those that are being released early. I hope that that inquiry will cover some of that as well.
Shabnam, we know from this case that many of the perpetrators were referred to as uncles of other members of these abuse gangs. You yourself, of course, you are a British Pakistani. Do you think that the community has questions to answer on why there are family links in so many of these abuse gangs? Do you think that is a particular issue for these Pakistani origin abuse gangs? Is there a link there potentially between cousin marriage and how families are involved in this horrifying abuse?
I don't think it's about the cousin marriage, but I think there are links in terms of those perpetrators, whose brothers and, family members. And what I would say is when they refer to them as uncle, it's not necessarily because they are actually related. Most people call me auntie. I'm referred to as an auntie G. That's a real cultural thing amongst many communities. I think you get that even in the Afro-Caribbean black communities. So when you're talking about these links where there are brothers involved, it's more likely because of the fact that they've run these businesses together, they've acted in unison, they've got braver and braver, and I'm not sure that that is connected to the other family members where, you've got wives, brother, aunties and other relatives.
Just quickly, do you think the police are now taking these crimes seriously? We've heard lots of stories of police turning a blind eye or even prosecuting the girls rather than the perpetrators. Do you think the police have learned from this now and are going to be much clearer on who the abusers are in future?
Well, I'd like to think that that is the case, but I think that this inquiry will unravel potentially if there are those cases where police are not doing their job properly. But I would like to say that, from what I've seen in the last few years, in terms of police investigations around child sexual exploitation, violence against women and girls, it is improving. They've still got a long way to go. So I think there's work still to be done.
I was in charge of the Lambeth Sex Offender Unit, and this was really before these grooming gangs came to public knowledge. But what it tells me, Don, is that even when these people are released, even though they're not on licence, they're on the sex offender register. But the problem is the police are utterly overwhelmed. When people say, oh, somebody's on the sex offender register, I think the public expect that an officer's knocking on their door every week. That's simply not happening. So these men are just being released back into the wild, really.
This is the problem. They are released back into the world. They are free to live their lives. Meanwhile, their victims are suffering for the rest of their lives. Surely this sentencing involved in these gangs is completely and utterly wrong.
It is utterly wrong. As you said, they've destroyed lives. And it wasn't just in Oxford. These people were travelling as part of a network. I mean, I noticed in your report that they travelled as far as Bolton, which is my hometown, and we know that those northern towns like Bolton, Blackburn, Rochdale, Oldham have all had an impact from these dreadful rape gangs. And the other unsaid thing here is really the most sex offenders, if I molested children and came back to where I live, I'd be utterly ostracised. And in the vast majority of communities, these people would be self-policed by the community. But I'm afraid that these people will be released into a community that just simply doesn't care. They will go back and they'll just be treated as normal citizens, and that is simply unacceptable. The religious and community leaders should speak out about this and say this behaviour is wicked and evil.
Why don't they, Mike?
It's the elephant in the room. It's a religious matter, isn't it? These girls were seen as trash. They were not of that faith. They were not Muslims, and therefore they were fit to be abused. That's what we've seen throughout these grooming gangs, and it's a real problem. The communities need to close down because, as I say, in most communities, a returning sex offender simply would not be accepted.
No, you're quite right. I mean, there's obviously a lot of scandal over Oasis and them using a Gary Glitter song, and people are getting really, really angry about that. But still, people are just letting these people walk the streets. It shouldn't be happening.
What we hear all the time from the government, we hear rightly that we should be targeting violence against women and girls. I've got 3 daughters. I don't want these men on the street. They're targeting people. They go out of their way, as you said, to target vulnerable girls with alcohol and cigarettes and whatever else. and this will happen again. You don't stop being a child molester. If it's in your blood to be a child molester, you will carry on doing it. These men are not going to be released and live some good life. Every day they're on the street, they're putting girls at risk, and that is just not on.
Mike, what should we do with them?
In my view, with child molesters, we should simply lock them up and throw away the key. It's as simple as that. When you release a burglar or a robber or a thief, you take a chance that they might not do it again. If they do it again, it's a bad thing, and burglary is sad, and theft and whatever else. But when somebody molests children, they ruin lives. That life is impacted on forever. And so in my view, if you do that to children, the system should not take risks on you. You are not to be gambled on. You can stay in that prison and stay there until you rot, because you bring nothing good to society. All you bring is risk and misery.